Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Allen. I'm going to keep my screen, if you don't mind, in a little bit of a smaller square. For some reason, my cursor has been acting a little weird when I make the expanded screen on this laptop. So I'm going to save myself that stress. I've had to start over 2 times because I lost the mouse. Not that you care. Also, if you hear any squeaking, I'm recording from my home, and this chair makes some weird noises. Apologies. If you hear it, I don't even know if you can. Anyway, you're not worried about any of this. You're worried about what I have to say. So why don't I just go ahead and say it? One, it's been great seeing everyone, or most of you, on Wednesdays for service learning get-togethers. I hope you're getting something from that. That's actually a little bit of method to my madness as far as watching that, because we're going to refer to some stuff even today. And as we get into Dewey a little bit, I thought it would be nice to see that more direct style of teaching. So there was an actual reason I wanted to show that. I am going to go ahead and try to schedule a third one this week. If you want to try to get and see how that all wraps up and get some hours for service learning. If you were interested in tutoring with Berkeley County, I do have an email out. I have not heard anything back yet. I know Tanner had asked if it was virtual or live. I'm not 100% sure on that because it was referred to me from our field office. I hopefully will find out immediately. When I told our field office, or Miss Baker, if you're not familiar, she's awesome. She was surprised that Berkeley County hadn't gotten back with me. I'm sure they're swamped right now with everything that's going on. I will touch base again with them on Monday or Tuesday and see if we can find out if the tutoring is live or virtual. Also, Boys and Girls Club, I emailed them. I haven't heard anything back. I checked with their director. She was having a little problems hearing back from them also. I'll touch base, but the main thing is just somehow get your service learning hours done. Again, if you can do tutoring, that's fantastic. If you can do something coaching, working with community organizations that have people under the age of 18, that's fine. Just check with me first. A lot of you have already done that. Some of you are doing tutoring or music, coaching. I'm good with any of that. Of course, we can also do the best practice videos, which we've been doing, and some of those are posted. I need to update that list, and I will. Next thing that I wanted to say, midterms were due this weekend. I'm actually recording this on Friday, October 9th. I have gotten your midterms in. You're all awesome. I just wanted to tell you, I am behind on grading though, because I got so locked in and figuring out grades that I'm a little behind on the grading for the prior week. I will do my best to try to get caught up either this weekend or early next week. So thanks for bearing with me on that. I hate to get behind on that, but that was kind of unavoidable. And I think, I'm trying to think if there was anything else I needed to tell you all or remind you for the class. Of course, if you have any questions, like I always say, feel free to contact me at any time. The Wednesday sessions have been nice because I know a lot of people have been coming in and asking questions or staying after. You all have been awesome. I know with everything that's been going on, being online, I go back and forth with it if it's a good thing or bad thing, but I guess it's the reality or it is a thing. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I didn't lose the cursor that time. That is a plus. And I'll kind of go over what we're going to be doing this week. Hopefully our class is showing up. There it is. I'm going to go back to our home page real quick. All right, a few things before we get going. This week, I have not opened week 8 yet because I'm fine tuning a few things. But this might be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know your opinions on this. We are done with the ed puzzles. One requirement we have to do for this class is do a little bit of history, especially the early history of education. We're going to get into the 20th century and such, and we did the week on law, so I'm fine with that. But ed puzzles are done. We're going to have a discussion board now. There is a link. You just need to click here, and it is right there. It is related to the Dewey readings. We're going to start doing experience in education, so you should have that as a little book. I do not have my copy in front of me, but I'll Google a copy of it here in a minute and show you what it looks like. The PowerPoint that I'm going to use this week is here. The Flipgrid is up, so that's what you need to do. If you want to go to the forum from there, you can, or you can actually go to the discussion board here, and chapter 1 and 2 is actually already up. You can respond to it. The prompt this week is actually, after you read chapters 1 and 2, and by the way, the Dewey book is very short, but I just want you to kind of talk about what do you think if education has become static and not employing experimental learning and such. We're going to talk a little bit about Dewey today. Actually, he's going to be kind of the focus of my discussion, if I haven't already said so. And there's no right or wrong answers on this discussion board. I want you to talk a little bit just about Dewey and some of the ideas, things you like, things you didn't like. Always good to cite things from the book. I will actually probably be a little tougher on grading. He's not a hammer, but I just want to make sure that you are doing the readings. Dewey is, I think, I would say he's kind of the godfather of modern education. There's, excuse me, hiccup. There's a lot of people like Piaget, Vygotsky, very, very popular, but I think everything kind of always seems to find its way back to Dewey. So we're going to kind of focus on it. And I have a feeling if you're going to take anyone out of this class as far as an educational theorist, Dewey would be the one. I would say Dewey 1, Piaget 2. Piaget, we didn't get too hammered down with that because that's something you'll get in some of your 320 classes and things like that. This is more of an introductory type thing. So there's the discussion board. The flip grids are still up there. You all rock the flip grids. Links are there. That's the big thing for this week. I am going to talk about Dewey for a little bit today. I have told myself this, though. I know I can get long-winded. I enjoy talking. But because we're going to be talking about Dewey for a few weeks, I'm not going to get too crazy on this PowerPoint. It is 30 slides, but you're going to catch me. I'm going to kind of skim it a little bit because I just want to give you a little bit of background on Dewey himself. So I'm not going to read slide by slide. I'm just going to kind of summarize on a few. I may even skip a slide or two. We'll probably come back to some things. I cannot remember if I said this at the beginning of this video or one of the ones I had to stop filming because of the cursor, but I'm going to go ahead and say it again just in case. One thing that I have liked, that because so many of you have been coming to these viewings on Wednesday, I actually picked that show for a reason. Because of the direct instruction, Dewey is definitely a proponent of student-centered learning, i.e. you want to structure your lessons around the strengths of the students and the students being active. And you're kind of seeing the differences in that with that show, because the Chinese method is very, very, very teacher-centered. Last week you watched the short video on Finland. I haven't had a chance to see some of your feedback on there. I actually really like the Finnish system. And I think when we talk about Dewey, you're going to find they employ a lot of Dewey's ideas in the way that they approach things. So that's more of a student-centered type approach. With all that being said, I will do this without getting too winded. I just want to give you a little bit of background on where Dewey's coming from. Don't forget, you do need, I said, let's do this, but I just want to make sure I am not forgetting anything. Let's go to our syllabus and, oh, I know I did forget to tell you one thing. I knew I was stalling. I'll tell it to you here in a second. As you can see, there it is, Dewey. Make sure you read chapters 1 and 2 on education and experience. And I said I would pull that book up for you. So here you go. Maybe. Let's keep that down for me. Education and experience. You can usually find a pretty cheap copy anywhere. There it is right there. Sometimes if you really fish around, I wouldn't even rule out that someone has a PDF online. But definitely check that book out. It is very, very, very small. It's nothing too long. I bet you if you looked on Amazon, you probably see it for 99 cents everywhere. That is it right there. The bookstore obviously has it too. What I was going to tell you all, and I know I'm doubling back here a little bit, forgive me, but what I wanted to show you, because we've reached midterm, after this week, I'm probably going to go in and I'm going to close a lot of these out to kind of clean up the sides. So probably what will happen is week 8 is probably going to be at the top. And that way you don't have to, there's nothing on here that you really need to go back and do. Midterm grades should be posted. It looked like everyone was doing well. Some people, I'm going to add 2 points to it because there was one question that I thought was a little vague related to whether it was a bishop or a priest. I mean, they're not interchangeable, but they are interchangeable. So I just didn't feel like getting into the vagueness of that, especially because it was a true false. It wasn't kind of a fair question. So everyone's grade will probably go up 2 from what I'm seeing right now. They should be released on Monday. So with all that being said, now I will open up the PowerPoint that I was going to talk about. John Dewey. Again, I will try to keep this brief because we're going to talk about him in a few different, for the next few weeks. But in case you're wondering who Dewey was or when he was living or when he was a contemporary of, so you can see he was born in 1859, lived in 1952. He is definitely in that progressive era that we kind of have mentioned with Vygotsky and Piaget. Even though Piaget kind of was in vogue and lived for a while in the 50s and 60s, and a lot of people gravitated to him, they're still in that progressive era of that early 20th century educational movement. And I think you can summarize that, especially Piaget and Dewey's kind of thought process, as you learn more through doing things. The book you're going to read, it says it, education and experience. You learn by experiencing things. It's a lot different than just a stand and a deliver. There's a line in the videos that we've been watching on Wednesdays that I absolutely love. The one English teacher actually says, not a teacher of English, he is English, and he said it, he was the math teacher. But he says, the Chinese method is teaching the content, but they're not teaching for understanding. That is a great quote. I think that's a good teaching philosophy. You're teaching, the content is important, but you've got to make sure that your students understand it. You're teaching for understanding. That is the goal of education. And I think that's what Dewey kind of gets into a little bit. Actually, a lot bit. So as you can see there, he lived to 52. So he was also living into a very dynamic time in the United States, World War I, World War II, Great Depression, a lot of change going on. And of course, if you think about it, I mean, he's born slightly before the Civil War, probably doesn't remember that, but all through that Gilded Age, which is when a lot of things were becoming very oriented to being the wealthy and the poor. Then you get into World War I, you get veterans coming back, educational type things, World War II. He was a very important time in education, a lot of changes and such. In case you're wondering where he was located, again, another one of these New Englanders, if you remember from your Ed Puzzle, it seems like everyone's hanging out there. Horace Mann, things like that. But Dewey was born in Vermont. He was married twice, had 6 kids, went to the University of Vermont. He actually was not in the realm of education at first, and I don't think it's on here actually, but he actually went and taught for a couple of years at a modern, small private type school. And he really had a gift for it. So he actually went to Johns Hopkins and was encouraged to do so, and graduated from the philosophy department there, and really focused his the rest of his career on bettering the field of education. As you can see there, he had a faculty position at Michigan. Michigan is a very prestigious type school. It is a prestigious school. And we're going to get into the pragmatic philosophy, but it's the whole idea of, learning through doing. He went to the University of Chicago, and that's, I think, the school that he's most associated with. And there's some of his works. We're not going to get into all this. I don't know if everyone's going to go into graduate school. You'll probably expand on some of this with Dewey in graduate school. I actually had to read the book that you're all reading in graduate school again because they wanted us to have fresh eyes with it. The ones that we're going to focus on are experience in education. And actually, I'll make a little bit of a reference to democracy in education because we did a week lecture on that. By the way, some of you cited that on your flip grids, which is awesome because I know you're listening and watching these for you, right? Anyway, so we'll look at all this. And by the way, if anyone ever wants to borrow any of these books, if you really start to like Dewey when you're reading, I have most of these. I know I have the latter 2, and I think the only 2 I don't have are School and Society and the Child and Curriculum. I also have another one he did on art and education. So anyway, Dewey, he's a New Englander, went to Chicago and taught in the Midwest. Again, he is associated with that progressive movement of the early 20th centuries. And just think, you hear the term a lot, especially this being an election year, but progressive, think about it more as to wanting to change something. These are guys that wanted to change the field. You know what? I'll say it I say guys, but even think about Barton when we were watching the Ed Puzzle and how she wanted to bring women teachers and women out to the Midwest to start teaching. That's a progressive type thing. She wanted to better things, make education a stronger field. That's really the heart of it. It's a different line of thinking, getting outside of that standing and delivering like you're seeing kind of on the Chinese videos. He is not, I think if you actually, his official title, and I think if you asked him, I don't know if he would say he was a teacher, but I think he is definitely more of a philosopher and kind of molds his philosophy around education. So I would say he's definitely more of an educational reformer than an actual teacher per se. What Dewey's pragmatic type, whoops, knocked my table there. What Dewey's approach to education, or that pragmatic approach, is, it's basically, again, we're kind of getting to that constructivist type idea. It's the idea of putting things together to learn. You're getting there. It's that inquiry basis. I'm a social studies person, but in social studies and in English, if anyone's in here in English, and actually, gosh, science and math, the inquiry approach is such a big movement right now. It's a lot of Dewey's ideas. It's that idea of learning through almost like a discovery type thing, analyzing and making conclusions and coming to a critical thinking type conclusion. That's really rooted in Dewey, at least for us in the United States. I won't say Dewey's the first person to come up with this, but I think he's definitely the one who was the biggest proponent and is most associated with that idea and that movement. There's a couple Dewey quotes if you're interested. Education is a social process. Education is growth. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. That's fantastic. I love that. And if you think about it, I really like that last quote. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. We're going to watch like a 3-minute video at the end of this. And one thing that Dewey actually says, I believe, in the video, and I'm probably not quoting perfectly, but he basically says, education is not about preparing students for college. It's about prepping them to have the tools to inquire and experience and want to experience things that interest them and what they're doing. It's different things. And if you think about it, I think we do that in school today. Sometimes high schools and is all geared towards making sure you get to college. And college is great. I loved college. I still work at college. But maybe college isn't for everyone. Or maybe we shouldn't guilt people who don't want to go to college. But if they go into something like, I'll use this as an example. This is not I have family members who actually work in this field, so I don't mind using it. If I was going to be a mechanic, I don't need to go to Shepherd University. I need to go to a trade school. Do I have the tools to learn, no pun intended, do I have the learning tools to build and understand and inquire enough to become the best mechanic that I can be? And quite honestly, probably make a lot more money, and it's a different type of intelligence, which we'll get into as another person later. But, education is preparation for life itself. It's simple, but it's brilliant. I mentioned the progressive movement, so I'm not going to get too bogged down there, but just so you kind of know, it's like it says there, it started really in the late 18th century as a reaction against the traditional educational practices. Basically, a lot of people felt that education was kind of snooty and it was geared towards just an intellectual type development. I think we still fight this. I mentioned it a few minutes ago today. I mean, what the role of education is, but the progressives felt like education should be for all. And, if you think about it, when Dewey was coming in, he started working at the University of Michigan not too long after Reconstruction. And if you remember your Ed Puzzle videos, it's a different world after the Civil War. You have African Americans who are coming up. They call it the Great Migration into places like Chicago and New York. Schools need, unfortunately, they're going to be fighting that battle of segregation, which was also in the Ed Puzzle. But in Dewey, by the way, is not about, well, I'm ruining it a little bit, but it's more about, getting education for all, making education the great equalizer. And as you can see, Dewey again broadened his perspective still further, seeing the purpose of the progressive education line in its preparation of the student for participation in democracy. That is a pretty key sentence also, and we're going to talk about Dewey and democracy here a little bit at the end, but it's that idea of making students understand that they're part of the social process, part of the governmental process, and they need to be active citizens for the betterment of themselves and their families and those like them. I Again, if you look at this, and I don't know how strong everyone is in their U.S. history, you're going to have some U.S. history. This is also occurring during what's called the Gilded Age, which has almost started to become like a very rich versus, I don't want to say poor, but there was definitely a huge class divide, and there wasn't a lot of governmental regulations on a lot of things. So I'm moving on. I said I wouldn't get bogged down. A couple other things that Dewey thought a progressive education should have: respect for diversity. I said I wouldn't jump ahead, and that's why I wanted to. One thing is he respected diversity, different ideas, interests, cultural identities. He also believed that education should be child-centered, not teacher-centered. Again, if you're watching the videos on Wednesday, they make reference to the idea of child-centered versus student-centered all the time. The Chinese method is more teacher-centered. The Western, that would be US, English, European approach is usually a little more child-centered. And I think you can see that when they were talking about the math and the timeline too. Because if you remember the math lessons, they were saying the one instructor who stood and delivered would do it in like a day or two, where it was taking the other class a week and a half to do the same thing. I think sometimes you will find that, especially when you're planning child-centered activities, take a little more time. That's not a bad thing. That's all about the inquiry and the discovery. And again, Dewey also, besides the respect for diversity, he wanted people to be socially engaged, communication, learning through contact, growth, rising up. He also, I've read different stuff on this, and it's going to kill me not to say this, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. He also kind of got into that idea that the school could be like a center of growth and social growth in communities. Some of Dewey's ideas are very clear. If anyone is from Preston County or knows where Preston County is in West Virginia, there's this place called Arthurdale. It was built in the 30s during the Great Depression. Eleanor Roosevelt was a big proponent of it. She used to travel up there. It's big into the whole idea of the socially engaged, the school community, talking back and forth and such. I might put a link up to it if you want to check it out. Nothing required. It was just something I thought I would mention. So, progressive. And a few things, I am going to read this one word for word because I don't think I can say it better, but how do we learn in a progressive educational system that Dewey is proposing? We learn something from every experience in education, whether positive or negative. Nothing groundbreaking there. It's very true. I think a lot of times we learn more from negative experiences than we do from positive experiences. One acclimates, learned experience influences, one's acclimated learned experience influences the nature of one's future experiences. I think that's a very true statement. Every experience in some way influences all potential future experiences for an individual. That's it. That's experience in education. I'm going to use my son as an example. He's in 6th grade. He learned very quickly a few weeks ago. He didn't write something down in his planner related to a class. And I'm going to give my son full due. He's pretty responsible related to his work and his grades and such, but he kind of got a little lazy or careless in how he wrote something down, and he got burnt slightly on a quiz that he had. And he learned, now he makes sure that he writes everything down in detail as far as what he has to know for the homework for the night or what's coming up in the week. It was a good experience. He probably learned more from that than he did from any class. That, when you write something down, make sure you write it down so you understand it. So that's one thing. Also, Dewey was big on interaction, and again, as you can read this, but I'll kind of hit the highlights. Past experiences and interactions influence present experiences. And also, as you can see, the teacher with good insight into the effects of past experiences, which students bring with them, better enables the teacher to provide quality education, which is relevant and meaningful for the students, i.e., when you're in the classroom, you need to also take from your experiences. That's your reflective learning when you're teaching and you have to do your reflections. I am not going to read all that list, but as you can see there are some things. It's the learning by doing, problem solving, social skills. This is all progressive education. It's forming a well-rounded individual, well-rounded student, well-rounded child. A lot of it's project-based learning. That's another big key word we say today. Think about this. Dewey's proposing this in the late 19th, early 20th century, and we're still working on getting it established in schools. So And there's a list. Again, you can kind of see some of it. Traditional schools, preparation for life. Learners are absorbers of information and authority. Teachers are sources of information and authority. Parents are outsiders and uninvolved. The community is separate. And progressive education is the exact opposite of all of those. Parents are part of the whole solution. Teachers are facilitators guiding students towards thinking. You want problem solvers, thinkers, planners. And the community is an extension of the classroom. Again, I was talking about Arthurdale. It's very interesting. I probably should have loaded something up on that, but I did not. So I'm not going to stop now. I might post something new, I said. There's a little more. One thing that you can see, we probably have it not, but a lot of times the curriculum is determined and no predetermined curriculum. I don't know if we quite get into that so much because we do have standards and things like that. Montessori schools may dive into that a little bit. I'll talk about Montessori schools a little bit later. Maybe some of you went to some. And again, there's it's all about the experience. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. A few other things, Dewey and democracy. The very process of living together educates very much. So that's a very democratic statement, actually. Here's his vision of a democratic education. We talked about this and saw a video on it, actually. Subject matter comes from the learner's needs. Grades and promotions should be eliminated. That's actually not that revolutionary. There's still people who actually talk about that, where we shouldn't label grades. Progression should just be on how you learn. So you might have some mixed up ages. It's almost, I hate to say, a single classroom experience, and it eliminates pass fail. You just have certain checklists and you move on. There's some schools that do that today in some private schools. I thought, and don't quote me on this, and I might have to ask this, I thought even Morgan Academy in Shepherdstown, and if anyone's went to Morgan Academy or knows, might understand this, but there's more about checkpoints that you progress up than grades, so to speak. It's supposed to eliminate some of the stress, and I think you're just kind of learning at your own pace. A lot of people talk about this with students when they're going into kindergarten. If you think, some people are saying, I actually held my child to go into kindergarten until he was 6 instead of 5 because I thought that he was more developmentally ready. And there's probably stuff to that, and maybe the better maturity and things like that. There's no shame in it. And again, learners should be involved in planning, executing, and evaluating activities. That's what that video was we watched. If you remember, there was a lot of planning and executing and students writing contracts and all. So he believed in a democratic classroom, and we discussed that. Dewey, again, is probably the godfather and the guy most associated with it. When you watch that video, that was a lot of Dewey practices as far as the democratic classroom. He challenged a lot of the old colonial things where, he felt that maybe modeling our schools, even though some fought this, we still, in the United States, especially in the 19th century, kind of went with that European model of schools. He felt that it was a class-based system. It was a sexist system. It was a racist system. And when he was it's not even debatable. In the 19th century, he's probably 100% right. All these things were factors in schools. Under the provision of the Constitution, schools should be secular in nature, no religion in schools. They shouldn't be in the public schools. That was something else he believed. What did he seek to change in school systems? He wanted students to be prepared for later life. He wanted them to be efficient decision makers in the systems that they have and what they were going into, and students to be able to mold their personality to society. He didn't want all students to be the same. He just wanted them to be able to be proud of who they were and then make that work for whatever situations that they were in, which these are all good social skills and societal skills. Where he was a lot of times questioned with a lot of his thinkers at the time, he believed that in learning, students should be involved in real life tasks. There's nothing like jumping in and just doing it type thing. And I am actually going to stop there because I know I'm kind of gotten long, and I might touch back on some of this later. This PowerPoint is up if you want to check it out, but I really was just shooting for the democracy part, and I even went past that. I am going to have this posted up. I'll probably do a little more to Dewey next week. I know this was just kind of a brief overview of Dewey. If I want a little quick, like I say, the PowerPoint is up. I will be willing to meet with anyone on Wednesday if you need to talk to me a little bit before, but I will run another one of those sessions. I'm going to stop sharing screen. Oh, you know what? I'm jumping. Like I'm going to finish. Hopefully you didn't click off. I'm going to post this video and I wanted to watch it. I wanted to give you a little bit of, that is the man himself. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. I skipped the beginning.
Going to college is not the same as getting an education.
Here, I'm going to start back there. That's the intro.
But going to college is not the same as getting an education, though the two are often confused.
John Dewey was 70 when this newsreel footage was shot, in which he distinguished education from mere schooling. Hello, I'm Larry Hickman. I'm here today at the Center for Dewey Studies at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Much of my professional life has been devoted to the study of John Dewey. In this short piece, we hope to introduce you to the life and work of this visionary thinker, who in many ways lived ahead of his time. The Burlington of Dewey's youth was a center of immigration and industrialization. The ethnic, class, and religious diversity that young Dewey experienced there may have helped prepare him for the experiences with diverse cultures that he would seek out during the rest of his life, both in urban America and abroad. In 1894, the recently founded University of Chicago appointed Dewey as head of its Department of Philosophy, which included psychology and pedagogy, led him in 1896 to found an elementary school that would serve as a laboratory for the university's new Department of Education. The reflex arc concept in psychology. In both sequences of the child's behavior, the seeing reaching and the feeling the burn withdrawing the hand, there was said to be an arc from the external stimulation of the sense organs to a response set up by the internal working of the child's brain.
That's the experience.
James attempted to improve on this model by emphasizing the associations produced in the child's mind and the new habit that they produced. In this case, the new habit was the child's withdrawing her hand in the presence of a flame. But Dewey was still not convinced. His own analysis of the learning experience begins not with a stimulus that is external to the organism, but with a stimulus that is a coordinated act involving the sensory and motor actions of the child and the context in which the situation occurs. The context includes such things as the child's past experiences, the environment in which the event takes place, and her level of engagement, or how involved she is in the experience. Even though his theory of learning and his promotion of the method of intelligence are still resisted by some people, they continue to enrich educational systems around the world. His pragmatic theory of truth as a process of discovery honors the experimental and creative capacities of human experience. Dewey's definition of democracy as belief in the ability of human experience to generate the aims and methods by which further experience shall grow in ordered richness is as fresh and compelling today as when he wrote those words more than a half century ago.
With the weird music and the guy who kind of looked like Dewey. It's like the ghost of Dewey. Anyway, I guess you can tell it's Friday. I'm kind of done. It's 4 o'clock. Hopefully you're having a good week. You'll have a good weekend. I will see some of you hopefully on Wednesday. And again, if you have any problems, feel free to contact me at any time. I want to close this out and stop my sharing and tell you all. Catch you later.